Very good afternoon. Good afternoon to all of you. We are live, and well, since we're live, it's all planned but also improvised. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to our guests, to all the people who are listening to us, professionals, colleagues, the operators that are listening to us. So we're here to keep on talking about the topics related to cultural and creative businesses and institutions. We will talk about the situation, the current situation, but also the immediate future, and also post-COVID future. This morning, we had another session. We thought that it would be more institutional, but actually it was quite practical. We received lots of food for thought, many ideas, instruments for the operators of creative and cultural businesses and institutions. Today, we want to go deeper into the matter. We want to be very practical today. We want to, to collect some ideas at the benefit of the operators of this sector. We know that the situation is not easy in the world, like we heard this morning. The title of this panel is New Markets, New Tools for Cultural and Creative Enterprises. So new markets and new tools. I would like to start from this topic. It's a pleasure to have with us a colleague, an expert, a person that has been working in this field for many years in the United States. And with him, we will stay with him for half an hour. And then we will have a virtual roundtable with all the other guests. We will try to collect more information, add new tools to our toolbox. So welcome Stephen Wolff, who's the founder of AMS Planning and Research. It's a very important reality that Stephen founded in the field of counseling, cultural development in the United States. Stephen was a protagonist of very important projects for local development on a creative base. So starting and supporting new cultural and creative companies, which managed to attract very important investments. And so in the United States, they are very good examples of urban regeneration and economic development based on, with a cultural dimension. We would like to ask Stephen to help us think from a more strategic point of view. And then later on, we will talk about our projects. Each one of us will describe their own projects.
Questions your contribution can start from. First point is we have to act and strategize in the light of the COVID crisis, the current crisis. And while doing that, we are forced to reimagine the future of cultural and creative industries. My first point is, at which level might such recovery take place? It has to be a local level, a regional one, or a global, or even a global level. That is a very important point, and the consideration that we share as well in Italy. My second point is about your very experience as a cultural entrepreneur, dealing all the time with the cultural issue and even with social innovation and urban regeneration. We would like to understand from you what are now the major opportunities for cultural innovators and policymakers to reinvent the scenario over a long-term perspective, which is the one we're interested in. Point number 3, how can we reimagine arts and culture as an actual platform for new models of economic growth? And even more, how can digital innovation help cultural players to better tackle new opportunities? These are my points, Stephen. I'm glad to give you the microphone and make you the presenter to share your visions and your experience this afternoon. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you, Antonio, and thank you everyone for being here this afternoon. It's an honor and a privilege to speak to you. I had, of course, hoped to be in Rome in person as I was 18 months ago, but unfortunately, we'll have to deal with this electronic gathering. Antonio, your 3 questions are questions that we're asking here in America as are being asked all over the world. And it's a time of a lot of thinking. 8 months into this global health crisis, folks have had the opportunity to take a breath, to not worry about the immediate, and to begin to think about the longer term. And I think that's going to be very important. I don't think we're going to return to normal. I think that what we're going to see is change in almost every dimension of the arts and culture sector. About this morning is whether or not this is in fact a recovery. Will we return to something that we recognize, or is it time for transformation? Is it a time where there will be significant change and we won't recognize arts and culture as we've known it for the millennia? Will it be a combination, something in between, or will it return to something we think is familiar? I think one of the things that it's very, very important to understand from the outset is that many of the challenges that we face as a sector around the world were in fact already there. This is one of my favorite images. When the tide goes out, you discover in fact there were rocks all along the shoreline that had just been covered with the water. And in fact, many of the challenges that we face around the world in arts and culture now are challenges that were already there. How do we make history contemporary? How do we engage people in a time of vast competition? How do we deal, particularly here in America, with calls for social justice and racial equity? These were questions that we were already confronting, but they've been lit with a very bright spotlight as we confront at the same time the global health crisis. In our work with clients in North America and around the world, we've identified 5 distinct stages from the beginning of the crisis to what we call return. And the question becomes, how do we move through these? Now, for all those of you who are PowerPoint fans, it's unfortunately 2-dimensional. I would love this to be 3-dimensional because it's not a straight linear progression. As I've illustrated, it's not one after the other. It's very iterative. But the first thing we need to think about is resilience. We need to be really sure why our organizations, why our assets are there in the first place. We need to stay engaged and connected to the people who care about the work that we do, who are our partners in distribution, in creation, and consumption. And very important, we need to be prepared to say it's going to be different. We may not do it the way we've always done it before. At the same time, we have to get ready. We have to understand that it's going to be different. There's a tremendous amount of data that we need to gather, and I'll use a couple of illustrations in just a moment so that we can explore new scenarios and fundamentally reimagine our sector. I think that it's reimagination of how we create, it's reimagination of how we deliver, it's reimagination of who participates and how. We're very concerned in the United States that our not-for-profit arts and cultural sector has used a tremendous amount of its cash reserves and its capital assets merely to stay in business while it has been shut down. And particularly in the performing arts center sector side, but as well in the visual arts, we were the first to close and are likely to be the last to reopen. And we're burning capital every month with no revenue. So we need to think about different business models and partnerships as we go forward. And then once we return, it's not going to be like a light switch. It's not going to be on, off, then on. It's going to take a long time to ramp up. We actually think probably in 4 or 5 stages, maybe 50%, 65 or 70%, 80%, 95% as we move forward. So how do we address those conditions? Well, the first thing which you pointed out as you began, Antonio, is we need to recognize that culture is essential and it will continue to be essential. It is a significant part of our economic system, and particularly in Italy, over 1.5 million jobs, nearly 6% of gross domestic product. The international tourism to the incredible cultural heritage throughout the country, and particularly in Rome, is amazing. And at the same time, 65,000 people and about 65 million people, and about 6.5 million in Rome and Milan alone. The concentration of cultural heritage assets in Italy is incredible, and it's important that we figure out how to bring those back. We think that one of the first and most significant shifts post the crisis will be a more active participatory culture, that people are going to want to get their hands in, a less passive relationship, more active performance, crafts, and particularly food. My last visit 18 months ago to Montalcino was one of the best times I've had to deal with the culture that is food and that is wine in that region. And there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to reimagine how we shift from just looking to actually participating. Another opportunity is to think about the amazing cultural heritage sites that we have and animating them in a way that is more than just look at this piece of history. In places like Edinburgh, in Athens, in Caesarea, they've taken centuries-old assets and used them as a background for reinterpretation. We think that that's a very significant opportunity in a way that we haven't seen it necessarily before. So I think that those 3 points about the essential nature of culture, the participatory shift, if you will, and using historical assets to animate current conversations is an essential part of this transition that we're facing. So you asked specifically in the first question, will this happen locally, regionally, or globally? I think that it's going to begin locally. Health officials are going to allow us to gather in local groups before they're going to allow us to travel, before airlines will resume the incredible business of tourism that we've all experienced. And I think that means that we're going to have to reinterpret how we engage in these sort of 3 strategies: the essentialness of culture, participation in that culture, and activation of cultural sites. So local first, regional second, which is a tremendous opportunity, I think, for organizations. And then we'll see something that looks like the historical global cultural tourism and destination tourism market that we had. To move to your second question, I think that it's very, very important for us to understand The future is going to call for change. I think that when you can step away from it, and I have the privilege, because I'm not a day-to-day operator, to be one or two steps removed, you can see that it's kind of like the seasons changing as we think about it. And I think the good news, particularly right now, as we hear global news about the possibility of a vaccine, that we begin to think about return, we can look towards the spring, that we have a lot of opportunities. But it's very, very important for us to understand that there are parts of this evolution that we can control, parts of it that we can influence, and that there are components that we will have no control over. As a sector, as arts and cultural institutions, as creative industries, we need to focus on those parts that we can control and we can influence. How do we communicate to our potential visitors and audiences? What kind of programming can we and should we develop? How do we focus on our partners and our stakeholders and engage them deeply in our future work? There are some examples, I think, in the global corporate world that we need to understand, because they're going to affect the core arts and cultural product. Epic Video, their product Fortnite, the online gaming platform, is poised to become one of the largest concert distributors, one of the most active tour stops for popular artists. They're recording live concerts, they're embedding them in the video game, and you can engage with those concerts either as a player in the game, as an avatar, or simply as a streaming client, as a pay-per-view customer. That's a pretty major shift for the live music world. Disney pivoted with its Disney Plus platform, and one of the most significant components it had was its screening of Hamilton early in the COVID, that created over 70 million downloads in the United States. And then you even have companies like IBM that are looking at how can they continue their shift from a product company to a I think that the key secret here to your second question about where are the opportunities is summed up in a quote that I received from a colleague at the Boston Consulting Group. And he said to me, Stephen, the first casualty of a crisis is imagination. Martin Reeves is a very smart man. He said, but those that shape and benefit from the future will be those that can imagine it. And the incumbency on our sector right now is to think about how we're going to be different. It's going to be to think about how it's going to be different and to continue. Now, the related part of your question about change, particularly as it relates to questions around social innovation and urban regeneration, are very, very important to our sector. Issues around the world have shown us is that our model is blowing apart. Where we used to be focused on what we made or what we showcased, we now have a much more complex system. We've become very, very active in the digital production and digital distribution space. For arts and cultural institutions who are used to live, three-dimensional work, becoming expert in the flat screen is going to require a lot of change and a lot of learning. There are other experts in this space, movie producers, television producers. We need to gain the skills that they already have. There's very significant demand being placed on all of us to be more active in the area, particularly in America, of social impact, developing content that is both collaborative and educational at all ages, for school-age children and for lifelong learners. And then the source of our work is changing. Our partnerships are going to become, in the near term, significantly more local. We're going to have different kinds of delivery systems, and we need to think about what that means. My instinct is it means that we're going to move from a very hierarchical structure to a much more distributed and networked structure. We're going to rely on different kinds of partnerships across our cities and towns and around the world. While individual destinations may still be the hub in this system, we're going to have all kinds of new producing partners. We're going to find them all over the world. I have a client in Washington, D.C., a major theater company that ran a relatively robust summer education program for school children. They pivoted very, very quickly and went online at the beginning of the crisis. They had a 900% increase in participation this past summer with customers in 33 states and countries. They'd never had that kind of penetration before. And they need to think about what that means, what pieces of it they keep, and what pieces of it they return to, because they're in Southwest Washington, D.C., which is a recovering, rejuvenating part of Washington, D.C. They're managing questions of gentrification and regeneration by serving their very local community, but now they're connected to a global community. And how does that impact their work? Skills that we have to learn. So Netflix just partnered with the Brooklyn Museum of Art to create a virtual exhibition using the costumes from the Crown series and the new The Queen's Gambit. Now, this might have been an exhibition, a popular exhibition that was packaged and toured around major institutions of the world, like the treasures from the Titanic or the collection of the Vatican. But now it's distributed around the world instantly to markets that would never have seen it before, particularly rural markets and places that are more difficult to get to. What does that mean about, as arts and culture makers, we have to think about differently? Performing Arts Center in Nashville, Tennessee, the heart of country music in America, converted its small theater into motion capture and video studio. It now creates what they call the Youp eSpace concert experience. It's a zero lag, two-way communication live music program that allows fans and artists to interact in real time. They'd have less challenge, Antonio, than we do with this presentation in terms of latency, in terms of production values. But they had to make a material investment in technology that they wouldn't have had to think about. And then the place where we always find so many answers are creative artists. A wonderful, wonderful performance artist I work with regularly, Natasha Toxos from Miami, has created a platform that allows her to converge storytelling, big data, and augmented reality, so that every time this performance is engaged, it's different, because the underlying data coming into it has changed. The perspective of the viewer from augmented reality has changed. And her production, which we hope will reveal in about a year, is going to blow people's minds, because they can be there live, they can be there virtually, and they can be connected. And how do we engage in that? I want to move to your third questions about new models for economic growth. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about what it's going actually to take to return to the business that we industry needs to be ready to return. In America, we have a significant negotiation going on between the unions that represent actors and artists and stage artisans and stage labor, and they're establishing terms and conditions under which these critical staff can return to work. As organizations, we know we need to adapt and change in 3 dimensions. We need to adapt and change physically with touchless systems, with improved airflow, not unlike after the 9/11 crisis, how air travel changed. New systems are going to be in place about how we actually use our facilities and our assets. We're going to need community health conditions to be such that we're allowed to assemble in the crowds that are so important. For millennia, art and culture has been about people gathering together to share an experience, and we're going to need the community health conditions to be in place for that to happen. And then, and only then, will we be ready for our audiences. Of infection has declined until they. This has significant implications for the sector that shut off. One day we were running full speed, the next day we were closed. And how we return. So if in fact, as audiences return, they return in groups, 20 or 30%, 50 or 60%, 85%, 95%. We're going to have to figure out how we ramp up our institutions to accommodate that. And it connects, Antonio, I think also to your very first question about where will they come from. Local first, regional second, global last. And that's going to have material impact for our sector. So just to wrap up and to thank everyone for their patience, Antonio and I had a much more of a dialogue planned, and I wouldn't have talked so incessantly, but that's kind of American, I guess. So I hope it's okay with all of you. Your third question was, how can we reimagine arts and culture as a model, a new model for economic growth? And I think this is the essentialness of what our sector has been all the time. Our art makers, our artisans, our craftspeople, our food and wine industry have something that is very unique. It's about celebration. It's about sharing. It's about learning. And I think that what we know for sure, and actually what we've learned, very interestingly, some data that was shared with AMS from the live performance group at Google just a month ago. When they look at what's changing in terms of streaming online, 4 of the top 5 areas of increase are things that either improve me personally, allow me to learn, and allow me to connect with things I wanted to experience but wasn't able to. When you think about that, and you think about what we do in our museums, in our theaters, in our galleries, we know that we can drive interest and attraction. The question is, how do we do that post-COVID? How do we do that in a blended environment that brings digital innovation into the system? Because we're going to have a hybrid system. We've been surveying since May about 10,000 ticket buyers a month across America. So we now have just under 100,000 contacts. And in terms of the digital distribution system, we've heard 2 very interesting things. 80% of the people see it as a critical stopgap measure. see it as a very important way to stay connected, to stay engaged, to stay aware. It builds loyalty and bond that we can measure during this time of a long intermission, as we call it. But only 21% of them say it's a permanent change in the way they engage with the sector. And as you might expect, that 21% are generally older, generally face more health risks, are generally more concerned about protecting themselves from the unknowns of this particular disease. That's going to affect the timing on the return. I think where we have to look to digital innovation as we go forward is to the art makers themselves. It's wonderful, wonderful. The New York Times every week now produces a digital tour around the world, places that I might not ever have gotten to. There's going to be a place for that because one of the things that the digital platform gives us is the ability to hyperlink, to connect, to go deeper, to choose our own path as we explore. I think we're going to find blended systems of live and digital engagement that are actually interactive, like the Youp space, where the maker or the artist, the performer, actually changes the path of where they're going. Or work like Natasha Toxo's, where data, real-time data, is influencing the performance itself. And look for you to call me back in if you need me. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It was inspirational, but even more importantly, it was operational, which is our today's purpose, the one of giving cultural and creative players tangible tools in order to better perform. Let me switch in Italian. Andiamo diretti.
All right, so now I'm going to move straight to the panel. And well, for sure, Stephen has given us some very important food for thought, some very important hints. Because, well, maybe some of you don't know us. It's a new reality. It was less than 4 years of age. It started in 2016 in Milan. And it was born following the principle of inclusion. Well, mainly we only work virtually, so online. Very rarely we have some presence meetings or physical meetings. So we meet in a city in Italy, and then we try and plan some projects during those physical meetings. Anyhow, we wanted to be a hub, a connection point between the civil society, so artists, managers, curators, directors of museums, that world around the concept of culture. Culture, what is a culture for us? So not just the performing arts or visual arts. So culture for us refers to the human nature, all the expressions of human nature. So it's quite broad. At the moment, we have around 3,000 people participating in Italy. Fabrizio, sorry for interrupting you. They are asking us if you can please turn up your volume. It's really, really low. Thank you. Could you please get closer to the microphone? It's really low. Thank you. I hope you can hear me better now. So we started with 3,000 people who are investing their time, their passion in the world of Italian culture. It's an association. There's no membership fee. Members only have to contribute to covering the expenses when we organize an event. But anyhow, it's a network. We work on projects. We are together in a totally in a way which is totally free of charge. I am the treasurer, and I'm really glad of it. So this is one of our main characteristics, and there's a lots of tension in the world of culture, and so the fact of working free of charge, totally no profit and free of charge, this is our main feature. And also we're very open, very transparent, and we are a neutral place where everybody can express his mind or her mind. During COVID, well, obviously we saw that dynamics changed quite a lot. So all the activities, especially for performing arts, theater, cinema, obviously they all had to stop during COVID. It was impossible to go out and to have access to these places. So we tried to conceive a tool, create a tool in order to give visibility to cultural enterprises. We tried to understand how we could build a bridge, an exchange place, a collaboration place between those who generate culture, also objects, cultural objects, and those who feel the need to have access to those objects or to those creations. So now I'm going to mention the digital world, obviously. Actually, this is also part of my job. I deal with the digital world. Digital tools allow us to ensure more access to contents. The various stakeholders of our chain can speak to each other. For sure, digital channel is extremely important. Many years ago, Ponte said that we will have to move bits and not atoms anymore in the third millennium. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to move knowledge. And as I said, we don't create, we deal with distribution though. So as Cultura Italia decided to create a place, we could name it a portal, a meeting place, a portal for products of excellence. So we tried to discover some products representing the Italian excellence, products that couldn't find the right channel to be known around the world, and also at the same time we thought that, well, through this portal, the portal is called Respiro. You can go to the portal and you will find a presentation of the idea and also all the products that we are displaying, promoting at the moment. So we think that the access to museums, but also theaters, obviously, or other activities, well, we think that they are a good place to present these products. So obviously there are many other similar commercial products, but since we are a no-profit organization, all the revenues, the markup, when we sell some of the products, it will be used in order to finance the museums and also to finance some other projects. There's we have a committee that will decide how to the money, that is to say 50% of what we are paid for the products. Well, we will give a share of it to museums and the remaining percentage to some cultural projects. So this is our idea. We're now building this portal, and I invite you to visit our virtual space platform. And for the future, we would like to have some physical corners where we will be able to sell the products. But at the moment, it's quite clear. The route is quite clear. So you enter a museum. There are some high-level products, and a good share of the revenues is used not to give money to the platform, but rather in order to give some breath, some support, economic support to those who are suffering from the economic crisis. It is a project that joins various stakeholders of the world of culture. We think that this is a way to give some help to the world of culture that is struggling at the moment. This is all from me. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear enough. I know that the volume is up and down, but I hope that at least you could get to the main contents of the project related to the project. Thank you. Thank you, Fabrizio. Thank you for telling us about your operational model. And this is exactly what we need today. We need operational models. And there's another operation model I'd like to talk about, the one from Invitalia. I think we all know Invitalia. It's the most important financial institutional intermediate in Italy to give support to cultural and creative enterprises. It's a public business that supports cultural and creative businesses. We all know the program called Cultura, Creare, and but I'm not going to give you any further details. So, let's say 240 initiatives funded by them until May, more than 40 million euros of resources invested, 16 million euros incentives already given to beneficiaries. But, instead of talking about numbers, today we're here to talk about practical ideas, practical initiatives to support companies. And, Vittorio Fresa is the symbol of Invitalia. He is very committed and is in charge of many projects. So I'd like to ask you, what is Cultura Crea learning us? What is the message from Cultura Crea to, well, for us? Which models are working? Which models are not working? How is the market changing? What are the Cultura is a very important observatory, and we would like to learn something from you. So, Mr. Fresa, I leave you the floor. Can you hear me? I hope you can. Loud and clear. Well, first of all, thank you for the very kind invitation. I'm extremely glad to be here. I'm extremely glad to listen to the other speakers. I know we have a major responsibility at the moment. We have to implement the policies made by Italian and European policymakers. Obviously, well, we have to listen. And so I'd like to start telling you about the model that we have, the model we have based on the Program for Culture and Development. Cultura Crea is, taking part in that European framework or program. We thought that we needed to have a specific operational program, ad hoc specific, not just based on the recovery of the cultural heritage. We're extremely proud of the Italian cultural heritage. For example, the Pompeii project. This is it received more than 500 million euros from the European Union as part of Cultura e Sviluppo program. Since I'm talking about Pompeii, since I'm from that region, Pompeii was quite degraded, and there was a lack of interest in Pompeii in Italy. But in the last few years, it has been regenerated, and Italy is extremely proud to have used the money given by the European Union. And there's even a path, a route inside Pompeii dedicated to disabled people. But, when we talk about models, we mean that we have to join together the world of cultural heritage and businesses. This is not to be taken for granted. It's not obvious. Policymakers or those who used to manage our cultural heritage in the past didn't have a very broad vision. So sometimes when we make proposals, these proposals are rejected. But then over time, we started to understand that we had to find a new way to understand how to propose our interventions, actions, together with those who manage our cultural heritage. And Stephen Wolff talked about the Italian cultural heritage. So we have to understand that we have very important attractors in Italy, and we will have to join forces. We will have to understand exactly where our local territories are going, which problems they have. And also, we have also understood the importance of social companies. For some people, social company couldn't exist. For us, it meant development at a local level. So social. If we think about the cultural heritage that we have in the south of Italy, how do you think that it could survive in the last few years, since the government was totally forgot about our cultural heritage? There are some organizations, associations of volunteers that kept our cultural heritage alive. So we would like these associations to be converted into businesses and create new jobs for those people who deserve it. We don't want our cultural heritage to be open just on the weekends and on well, holiday banks. But how can we do that? How can we guarantee to have new business companies at the moment, considering the deep crisis we are going through? We have to make agreements at the local level with the so-called attractors. We started collaborating with Paolo Giuliarini and Professor Nicolais, two visionaries who allowed us to have access to the Archaeological Museum of Naples. And we also signed an agreement with the University of Naples in order to carry out promotional activities for the cultural heritage of Italy, not just the cultural heritage of our region. And we even created a desk inside the Archaeological Museum. There's a new wing of the museum that has been inaugurated by Paolo Giuliarini. And well, we also inaugurated the auditorium. We did the same in Calditello, a place that is a victim of corruption and illegal activities. Camorra and Mafia were managing and were controlling heritage sites. And so we managed to get there and to kick out the mafia. So we are working a lot also in Taranto in order to regenerate the old city center of Taranto. So let's try and reach agreements with local stakeholders. This is my message, in order to understand together where the territory wants to go, which options do we have, how to transmit innovation. Because another very important point is that some of the meetings we had at the Archaeological Museum, well, we had some meetings at the Apple School. So the main idea is we want to join forces, also using the new modalities, the new methodologies. And during this year, we have achieved impressive results. We have received increasing demands, more than 100% requests to take part in our projects. So maybe we have understood how to work together. We can't rest on our laurels. We can't stop now because we haven't covered the entire Italian territory. But anyhow, what I can say is this crisis has allowed us to understand that culture is vital for human beings. When bookshops reopened after the lockdown, many people said that people were missing bookstores, for example. And so we need to overcome the crisis, remembering these principles and these ideas. At the moment, we are trying to give some money and some incentives to the companies that are suffering. We are giving 25,000 euros to organizations and businesses that are suffering. What is very interesting is that for next year, policymakers are studying some instruments that calculate the total value of this value chain. So policymakers are trying to study some incentives and money, some funds to give to those companies that are suffering. The only thing we can do is to work next to the policymakers to make sure that the law responds to the needs of operators. In order to be innovative, we have to be transparent. That's another thing we have to do. It means that there has to be a close proximity between the chain and the instruments that are implemented. Well, this is what we're doing. This is what we're trying to do, and trying to do it at the same time trying to listen, as I said, and well, to listen to the needs of the sector. One of the things we did was we just picked up the phone and we called the operators of our sector. We asked them, what do you need in order to survive? So I would like to conclude now. I think that a crisis always changes people. So we will go out of the crisis with some changes and with transformations. So if somebody asks me, would you like to make 3 call conferences a day? I would have said no, totally no. But actually, this is what I'm doing. So you can never tell what you will do. And well, as Stephen said, well, the idea of urban regeneration is very important. I think that smart working is a good model. So probably we will have to rethink about our territories and the image of the network that Stephen showed us, and also the image of the rocks that come up after the tide. Well, it already existed and we didn't know. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you for being on time. Well, actually, you've also given us very practical elements for our reflection. Well, we are just joining the pieces of the puzzle at the moment. What you do is you are a public body that is acting from the control room, and you are taking your responsibilities in order to support the different sectors, and in particular supporting the cultural and creative sector. Another piece of the puzzle consists of foundations and bank foundations. Compagnia di San Paolo in Turin, we all know it. In Italy, it's a model, a role model, a foundation that works in a city that has been able to regenerate itself, especially through culture and excellence. We're talking about Turin. So, Compagnia San Paolo has developed and changed its tools. They cultivate a collaboration with creative enterprises and cultural bodies. So the foundation supports these initiatives. So Francesca Gambetta is in charge of the Switch project, a project that tries to create a synergy between new technologies and cultural businesses. So Francesca, please, can you tell us about your experience? And also, can you tell us how you have created the new tools that you have created? The floor to you. Thank you. Very good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for the kind invitation. It's nice to be all together and share these important ideas for our future, programs. For sure, the years ahead will be extremely challenging. Well, I'd like to share a presentation with you. So about our foundation, Compagnia di San Paolo. And in particular, I'd like to talk about the digital transformation. So when talking about the relation between the digital new technologies and the foundation. Well, actually, the foundation already started asking itself some questions already some years ago, because we know very well that the new technologies can play an extremely meaningful role for our cultural heritage in terms of management, for sure, because they can simplify the management and improve the management, but also promote the value of the cultural heritage, and also they can help us improve the accessibility by the public. At the same time, well, our cultural institutions are now accepting the challenge. They want to be active players within the framework of new policies. So, our Compagnia di San Paolo has reorganized itself based and also based on the United States 2030 agenda. Well, we have decided that our mission had to be the following one, that is to say, creating attractiveness. We wanted to use the digital transformation in order to increase the attractiveness of the territories. And obviously, as I said, also with a better management of the cultural heritage. So we wanted to innovate at a national and international level. And for sure, if our territory manages to be innovative, then our territory will become more attractive. And always making reference to the principles of the United Nations that talk about the innovation of infrastructure. We're very glad that for the next generation plan, the new digital technologies are one of the main pillars for investments. When we started talking about these topics in 2017, at that time, there were three main deficiencies that could be considered as an obstacle to the sector digitalization. Well, first of all, there was a lack of a medium long-term digital structure for the stakeholders. So it was there was a need to introduce innovative processes, and then there was a lack of resources for the investments in technological and digital innovation, and then there was a shortage of digital culture and competence within cultural institutions. And so there was a lack of skills, and there was also a lack of interest towards the world of cultural heritage. This is why we decided to act and do something in favor of digital transformation. We proposed some actions in order to encourage bodies, institutions to do something. We decided to invite cultural businesses to define a medium long-term plan based on digital innovation. So these are all the elements that we try to put together. And then what else did we do? Well, we decided to use Fondazione Links. It is an instrumental body of our foundation, which aims at accelerating innovation processes in the public and private sector, supporting the use of new technologies, creation of new technologies, projects which are open to innovation and competitiveness, and also to the most innovative market trends. Fondazione Links, therefore, became a partner of Compagnia. And Fondazione Links is a facilitator at the moment along this process of digital transformation. Why that? Well, because we realized that, first of all, the world of culture and the world of technology at the moment are still too far away from each other. Maybe not so far like in the past, but they're still very far from each other. And however, they still speak two different languages. They can't understand each other. And then the second reason for this choice is the challenge of digital transformation that is very challenging for cultural institutions in our country. So we invited cultural institutions to be involved with new methods, new skills, and new infrastructure. And at the same time, obviously, we wanted to support them. In February 2020, actually, 2 weeks before the lockdown, so obviously without being able to imagine the big role of digital technologies in the following months, we launched the Switch competition, or the Switch call, which had 3 objectives. So as you can read, these are the 4 objectives of the Switch call. First of all, promoting the culture of strategic planning and also developing competence, skills, and the culture of innovation of cultural institutions. And the third aim is contributing to economic sustainability of the institutions. And then last but not least, we wanted to set up a higher contamination between the technological world and the world of cultural heritage. We wanted to be able to define a shared paradigm for an efficient management and digital interpretation of the cultural heritage. The Switch call, due to its complexity, was divided into 2 steps. The first step, first of all, we needed to present a multi-annual innovation plan. This stage was concluded in May 2020. 49 institutions applied, so mainly from Piedmont and Liguria regions, just to name a few of them. We have Consorzio Residenze Sabaude, Palazzo Reale di Genova, Teatro Regio of Turin. So quite different institutions that applied, and those 12 of them that continued through the second stage. In October 2020, they had to submit an executive project in order to give more details about the plan defined during the first stage. All right, so thanks to the collaboration with Fondazione Links during the first stage, Fase 1, we drew up some guidelines in order to draw up a multi-annual innovation plan. The guidelines are available on our webpage. You can also download them if you want. And we introduced them during a webinar in the spring. So these are the guidelines. As you can read, this is the index mainly. There are 2 concepts that I'd like to highlight. Well, first of all, we highlighted that digital transformation has to support the strategic mission of institutions. So the digital transformation has to be able to cover the different sectors of cultural institutions. And in order for it to be efficient, its objectives have to be consistent with the institution's mission. So I highlight this because it's not so obvious, it's not so easy, and not so obvious for cultural institutions. So when cultural institutions look for technological innovation well, they have to understand that the digital transformation has to be at their service. It has to be supportive. It has to support its mission. And well, of course, this is not an easy objective. And then secondly, a second element highlighted on the guidelines was to highlight that the developed strategy can always be implemented, but if necessary, it needs to be reviewed. Why that? Well, because digital operations are always work in progress. They require cross-functional approach. They need new skills all the time. There may be some very quick changes due to new technologies getting on the market. So this is why we insisted on the institutions to have a sort of a circular approach. Well, some KPIs were defined, but the KPIs have to be reviewed. It is necessary to measure the KPIs, analyze if the KPIs are achieved. So always keeping everything under control, not just controlling the development of the plan, but also what happens outside. And so being able to recalibrate, replan the actions if needed. Then during the second stage, it was more one-to-one, and we had some meetings, some one-to-one meetings together with Fondazione Links. We tried to understand the feasibility of the executive project that the institutions had to submit. We went deeper into some project management instruments. So this is just an example. This is the first example of a model that we implemented. And I'd like to share with you this other experience that we started in 2019, actually end of 2019. This is an operational project called CRM for museums in Turin. It was created at the Polytechnic School of Turin. I know that yesterday Professor Agostinho from the Polytechnic School of Turin took part in one of your sessions. And so the National Museum of Cinema, Consorzio Residenze Sabaudia and Polytechnic School, they joined together and they tried to understand what kind of innovation strategies they could generate together. So they met together, and at that time, they all highlighted the need to have a CRM system, that is to say, a tool that can facilitate marketing strategies towards their audience or potential audience. In the light of this consideration, and also remember that these three museums, we are shareholders of the three museums. We have our share to pay each year. So we developed a network in order to help the museums to generate the CRM. For sure, their CRM will be customized based on the needs of each museum. But anyhow, the basic architecture will be the same for all of them. This is a unique chance for us. These three museums before 2020 had around 2.5 million visitors. That is to say, half of the total number of visitors that visit the museums in Turin also visited these museums, these three museums. So the fact of having a tool for visitors, well, that was a very important chance for us. But so what did we do? we underlined the need to have a project team, innovative project team. Again, we involved Links Foundation, and as you can see, they had two main roles. First of all, they were appointed as a PM, technological PMs. So Fondazione Links was nominated or appointed technological PM. They had to deal with the suppliers in order to communicate with the suppliers and inform them about the needs of the museum. And then we have the facilitators. So facilitators means listening to the needs of the cultural institutions, and also thanks to the staff of Compagnia San Paolo, the facilitators translated these needs and then communicated these needs to the technological PMs. So this is our model. And we thought that it was very useful to work based on this schematic model. And for sure, we will replicate this model also in the future. Specifically, the CRM project is now going to be concluded. It should be finished in the next few months. And this is the roadmap. As you can see, Fondazione Links was vital, really fundamental here during these two steps because, we studied the cases, national, international cases of museums that already have a CRM system. We explained to Turin museums about a CRM system. So we made the museums carry out a very deep analysis about their needs. And also we made a map of the technological needs of the museums. And then this was all translated into the drawing up of technical specifications for the call. And then later on, before launching the call, we invited three major technological suppliers at national level. And so thanks to that, the museums managed to understand understand their needs. This is all from me. I'm sorry if I was a bit confused and confusing, but I hope that it was, I hope you could catch or get to the main meaning of our projects. Thank you. Sorry again. Well, thank you, Francesca. Thank you for showing your models. These models, they have to be replicated. Absolutely. They also have to be, they are scalable, so they have to be implemented and can be implemented also in other contexts. Thank you for presenting your projects. So now we will keep on talking about the relation between cultural institutions, creative enterprises, the abilities of these two worlds to work together, toolbox, training. So now we are going to leave the floor to Silvia Pulino from John Cabot University, and she directs a school for entrepreneurs. Obviously, they also have to touch the topic of the cultural and creative industry. So is it possible to have these two worlds meet together? I know that these worlds have different management structures and methods, but still they have to be able to find a meeting point. So now I'm going to leave the floor to you, Silvia.
Solo tempo di andare giù lungo la long list dei relatori.
Right. Silvia, the floor to you. Well, first of all, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, Antonio, for inviting John Cabot University, and thank you for inviting me as a representative of the John Cabot University. I must say that I feel a bit embarrassed after such a highly distinguished guests, very prestigious speakers that are much more inside the cultural framework than me. Well, why am I here? Why could I contribute to this context? Well, I deal with companies, I deal with startups, the first stages of companies. I also deal with training, learning, how to plan, how the young people of the future should be. And obviously, these worlds meet with the world of culture quite a lot. Well, also because John Cabot defines itself as a liberal arts university. So it's a university that doesn't just focus on technical aspects, but actually it wants to take into account culture in general, culture as a vehicle to fulfill our dreams and our personal growth. So these topics are extremely important for us. And Antonio, you said that I am the director of a center for entrepreneurship. Well, it's true. It's true. And what I do is I try to support our students with all the tools we can give them. But before providing them with the toolkit, we talk about entrepreneurial mindset, which is not specifically aimed at starting a company, but actually it's about providing some behavior, attitude, the ability to imagine, create based on our imagination. So things that are fundamentally important, regardless of the studies the university studies that we're doing. We also have a master's degree in history of the arts, and many of the students actually take part in the institute activities. So this is just an introduction to say that I think that yes, there is interconnection between these different disciplines. Well, I was I thought about the world of culture, and Stephen Wolff really highlighted some fundamental things that are taking place nowadays, and then also the other speakers anyway, they also touched upon very interesting elements. I'm not going to repeat, I just like to underline a couple of things. For sure, we are going towards a higher complexity in the world, thanks to technologies, thanks to communication, and also thanks to the recent needs that emerged recently. At the same time, together with this complexity, there's an opportunity. I think this is extremely favorable. We are now turning down many walls, many barriers. So we are destroying many barriers that always set obstacles in Italy, according to which artists could only be artists, entrepreneurs could only be entrepreneurs. Instead, the borders are now blended. So fading away, we see new sectors coming up like digital humanities, that is a blend of many different sectors. And I think this is a point of strength that we have to start from again. As Stephen said, we have an opportunity to rethink, reimagine the future. And I think we have to do this all together by joining different perspectives and points of view. And well, when we highlight the world of culture, I see that there are some very interesting gaps. Somebody might say that they are well, scary, but actually I think they are interesting. There are some educational gaps, first of all. I mean, there are many artists, many players in the world of culture that don't have all the necessary skills from the technical point of view and also business or marketing point of view. And these skills are highly needed, deeply needed nowadays. So again, the monolithic players that we used to have in the past are now fading away. Now, many artists are entrepreneurs of themselves at the same time. So again, there's a gap, as I said, from this point of view. There's a lot to be done from the investor's point of view. There are new forms of investment which are made possible thanks to a technological shift, but also a cultural shift. There is a desire for participation, not just by those who have who produce or use or have access to the cultural heritage. And this is another gap. And then another gap, which we have mentioned already, is we have to support the contamination, encourage contamination between different players and different sectors. Some of the examples that we have heard about today show us that when you join together different players, what comes out are some very interesting collaborations. So I'm talking about the construction of an ecosystem that already exists in the field of startups or in some other fields. Why? Because it's much easier there. It's just more natural, more spontaneous, because it's easier to understand how to get profits, how to get profitability. So it was just easier to create a very robust, solid ecosystem in certain sectors, which are more productive in economic terms. However, we should not forget that the UNESCO said that the production of cultural heritage is an indicator of social and economic wealth. So I think that post-COVID is also an indicator of physical health. So we have to go back to putting the idea of value at the center, not just economic, but the human value of culture, and it's important for the social life of a country. So going back to the idea of an ecosystem, again, as I said, there are several players involved, and it is necessary to support the creation of this ecosystem. I think that nowadays it's easier to imagine the creation of a very lively, productive ecosystem in the cultural world, thanks to the recent changes that we've gone through. From my point of view, I think that universities and training centers can play a very important role from this point of view. When it comes to creating accessible, affordable training courses, accessible to everybody, to our graduates in business and marketing. It would be very important to understand that there's also a whole cultural sector that has to be taken into consideration together with a digital world, a visual world. And, the business world is exploring these sectors just now. It's starting to explore them just now. And well, obviously, also those that work in the field of culture, they will have to better understand the world of business. So we now had the chance to explore some new ways, some off the beaten track new ways. There are now, well, new ways for creative cultural talents inside or applied to the business world. This is very important, and it can be supported very well. It has to be supported. I mean, this meeting between technologies and the world of culture, it may generate extremely interesting results. When we talk about a toolkit, we're talking about well, a cultural component in general terms. I mean, we have to educate young people, explaining to them that culture is a pillar, the foundation of whatever we study. It doesn't matter if we're studying physics, chemistry, or humanities. Culture is a fundamental base that preserves innovation and the ability to innovate. So this is very important, and this is what the toolkits can do. And then there are some other skills. There's an entire set of skills, like, for example, being able to speak in public, being persuasive, being able to convince an audience, but also imagining new ways to produce culture. Sometimes it means just simply rearranging things that are already existing, redistributing them, promoting them, reaching out to a wider audience. There's a lot that universities can do. The universities are very well prepared and organized. For example, at John Cabot, we are trying to carry out a project. Well, it seems quite beautiful to me. Antonio, can you give me one more minute to tell about this project? All right. So we are trying to join together a network of museums and our classes, history of the arts classes, and so that our students can conceive some new routes or new visits inside the museums. And this system is a system that will continue over time. It is based on participation because our students bring their own ideas, and it is also linked to the academic world. Therefore, there is a certain seriousness and rigor that will guarantee a very long-term process and long life to this project. Thank you.
Grazie Silvia, ed è bello vedere alle tue spalle un business model canvas.
Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you also for showing the business model canvas in the background, which is very useful in order to have different people working together, in order to have well, the mindset of a manager, meeting the mindset of an entrepreneur, etc. So thank you. Now I'm going to introduce her in Italian, and then I will ask questions in English. It's a pleasure to have with us research. So it joins all these elements together into very practical programs, and it also allocates very important funds. I'd like to ask Francesca a question, and well, so in English.
Very glad that you are here with us today. And as everybody is looking at Nesta as a sort of unique selling proposition in the space of supporting culture, creativity, innovation. My first point is I just wonder how Nesta is envisioning the future, even in the light of the COVID crisis, of course, which is changing dramatically our current scenario. And second, I personally wonder whether the Nesta model can be exported globally. And that would be maybe very interesting to us to understand. I make you presenter in order to elaborate over these points and your considerations. Francesca è offline però, eh? La regia cosa ci dite? Perché era online ed è andata offline. Ci sapete ragguagliare?
Francesca is offline, so I'm asking our technicians, can you tell us something about her? She is offline. I hope she can come back. I hope she manages to connect. Well, actually, I'd like to draw conclusions now. So I'd like to invite Maurizio Stumbo. He is a director of LazioCrea. This is an innovator, digital enabler for development projects of Lazio region. They have introduced some very interesting innovation projects based on the promotion of the cultural heritage. Sorry, Maurizio, for giving the floor to you now. I'd like to ask you, what are your new strategies? Can you hear me? All right, so thank you. Thank you, Antonio. It's a great pleasure. It's an honor to be able to take part for the second year in this very important initiative. So actually, we don't do culture. I mean, but what we do is we try to contribute, thanks to Lazio region. We try to promote some cultural sites. Why that? Well, because we want to go beyond Rome. Rome is so famous in the world that many other good things are just neglected, forgotten. And we know how many beautiful cultural sites are located in the rest of the region apart from Rome. And so this is our task. We try to join our territory and multimedia elements which we use for their promotion. So obviously, the physical side keeps being the protagonist, but for sure we want to make the visit more pleasant for tourists. So this was our starting experience. We started with the castle of Santa Severa. I have a few slides. I'm not sure I will manage to share them. The castle of Santa Severa was a beautiful example, is a beautiful example. The region restored it. In 2018, the restoration finished, the restructuring finished. And we created some experiences. One beautiful experience of augmented reality or interactive visits. I must say that the number of visitors has increased, and this beautiful castle in the northern part of Rome by the sea, one of the few examples of medieval castles on the sea, by the sea, well, it was promoted by us. Now we have another challenge that is even more fascinating. We're now working on the in some caves in the province of Frosinone, where there are some bats inhabited by bats. Bats are also quite trendy at the moment thanks to COVID. So what is the challenge at the moment for us? We would like to create something available to our citizens, merging together the physical element, lights, and also multimedia technologies. So this is a light technical, illumination technical project, multidisciplinary project. There's a work group with some light experts, the bat expert, and the experts in caves, because obviously we can't change the balance or the internal balance and the environment inside of the cave. We hope we will be able to start to inaugurate it in April, May. So there will be many sensors registering the humidity of the plants and these lights, colored lights inside the cave. So the colored lights will make the caves even more beautiful, and we'll also have some 3D mappings in order to recreate for young people, for example, the formation of stalactites and stalagmites. We don't want to invade the caves. We don't want to we don't want to ruin the caves, but we want to increase the attractiveness of these caves, because people usually just go to Rome. Even Rome inhabitants feel very close to the Colosseum, but they don't even know about these beautiful caves. I visited the caves in Puglia, and I didn't even know that we had caves near us in our region. So we're trying to stimulate some startups, for example. So we're trying to understand how we can do it. That is to say, trying to create interaction between color, lights, and some other visual aspects. So some proximity sensors that activate the light with different colors. These are some of the things we're doing, and I'll keep you updated. Thank you, Maurizio. We know by experience that digital projects can be excellent facilitators of development in order to trigger proximity tourism, but also so-called in-depth tourism, which is the type of tourism that we should stimulate in the coming years. So by creating synergy between culture and creativity, the past and the present, between politics, intermediaries, institutional intermediaries, and companies. There's no choice. For sure, we will have to do it by starting from our local excellencies and new competence that is created on the territory, and then may also become best practices at international level. Thank you so much. I know that we are a bit late, but it's a very important topic, and it deserved to be tackled in this way. Thank you again. Thanks for your speeches. And thanks for your passion. We need passion at the moment. Thank you again, and best of luck to all of you. I hope to see you soon. Thank you.